The evening was calm, the sun sinking low behind the trees, painting the neighborhood streets with orange light. The man drove back from work tired but relieved to be home. He had been looking forward to a quiet night, maybe dinner, maybe some time by the lake. But as he turned onto his street he slowed, his eyes narrowing. Something wasn't right. He looked to the curb where he had parked his Jeep that morning. The space was empty, his pulse quickened. His Jeep was gone. His first thought was theft. His second thought was a mistake. Maybe he had parked somewhere else. He pulled into the driveway quickly, jumped out, and walked toward the garage, his chest tight. The lock that usually held the garage door shut hung twisted and broken, sliced clean through as though someone had taken heavy cutters to it. His stomach dropped. His Jeep had been inside when he left it. He knew it. He touched the metal of the broken lock, still cold but sharp at the edges where it had been cut. Fury burned in his chest. He spun around, scanning the street, and that was when he heard the whispers. Neighbors gathered at the end of their driveways, eyes darting toward him then away, their mouths moving quickly, gossiping. And then she appeared, Karen, the HOA president, walking casually down the sidewalk as if she owned the ground beneath her shoes. In her hand she carried bolt cutters, the same size as the cut on his lock, her chin high. Her lips curled into a smirk that made his fists tighten. She stopped just a few steps away, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Vehicles violating our rules get removed," she said proudly, as though she had done a service for the community. The man's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides, his eyes locked on her, his voice low but sharp. "You cut my lock, you broke into my garage, and you stole my Jeep." But Karen only shrugged, smirking wider. "Not stole, enforced. Rules are rules. And your Jeep broke them. You should be thanking me for keeping order." The neighbors whispered louder, some hiding smiles, some shaking their heads, none brave enough to step forward. The man's chest heaved, his anger ready to explode. But he held it. He breathed slowly, because deep inside he knew something Karen did not. Something that would crush that smirk from her face when the truth surfaced. He stepped closer, his voice so low only she could hear. "You don't even know who that Jeep belongs to." Karen laughed lightly, brushing off his words. "It belongs to you, and now it belongs to the HOA, simple as that." But he shook his head slowly, his eyes burning into hers. "No, Karen, not to me, not to you, and soon you're going to regret ever touching it." Her smile faltered for just a second, confusion flickering in her eyes, but she quickly regained it, turning to the crowd. "Don't worry everyone, the problem has been taken care of. The HOA always protects the neighborhood, even when some people think they're above the rules." The neighbors clapped nervously, eager to stay on her side, eager not to become the next target. The man stood still, his fists still clenched, his silence louder than her words. He turned slowly toward his house, stepping back onto his porch, his eyes never leaving Karen's. She smirked one last time before strutting away, swinging the bolt cutters like a trophy. The whispers followed her down the street. But the man stayed frozen, his heart pounding, his mind racing. His Jeep was more than just a vehicle, and Karen had no idea what she had set in motion. No idea that cutting that lock had opened a door she could never close. He whispered to himself as the night settled in. "You don't even know what you've done." The next morning the man woke up restless, his mind still burning from what had happened the night before. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes he saw Karen's smug face holding those bolt cutters, the broken lock swinging on his garage door, and the empty space where his Jeep once stood. He pushed himself out of bed and stepped onto the porch. The air cool but sharp, the neighborhood already awake, neighbors moving about their yards, their eyes flicking toward him then quickly turning away, whispers trailing in the air, and there she was, Karen, standing with two board members at the end of the cul-de-sac, pointing at houses, scribbling on her clipboard, laughing like she had just won some grand victory. His fists curled but he forced himself to stay calm. He walked down the steps and crossed the street, his steps heavy but steady. The crowd of neighbors quieted as they saw him approach. Karen noticed too, her smirk spreading wider. She tilted her head, her voice sharp and mocking. "Good morning, I hope you slept well without your little Jeep causing trouble." The man stopped a few feet away, his voice low but steady. "You had no right to take it," Karen laughed, shaking her head. "No right? I had every right. The HOA rules are clear, no unauthorized vehicles, no oversized trucks or Jeeps cluttering the streets. We gave you notices, we warned you, and you ignored them, so I acted." The board members nodded nervously, clearly unsure but too afraid to cross her. The man's jaw tightened, his voice sharpened. You broke into my garage, you cut my lock, you didn't just move a car, you trespassed and stole property. Karen's smile didn't fade. In fact, she leaned in closer, her voice dripping with arrogance. Stole? No, enforced. You refused to respect this community, and now you're facing the consequences. The Jeep is being held until the fines are paid, and if you can't pay, it will be sold. Simple. Gasps and murmurs rose from the neighbors, some looking away, some whispering to each other. The man felt the heat rising in his chest, every instinct screaming to shout, to reveal the truth right there. But he didn't. Instead he leaned in slightly, his voice dropping so only she could hear. You have no idea what you've done. That Jeep isn't just mine, and when the truth comes out, you'll wish you never touched it. Karen's smirk faltered for the briefest moment, confusion flashing in her eyes, but she quickly regained it, turning to the neighbors, raising her voice loud enough for all to hear. Do you see, everyone? He still thinks he's above the rules, still pretending he's the victim. But rules apply to all of us, and no one, not even him, is exempt. The Jeep is gone, and soon he will learn what happens when you defy the HOA. The neighbors nodded hesitantly, some out of fear, some out of habit. But the unease was clear. The man turned away, his silence stronger than shouting. He walked back toward his cabin, his steps heavy but his resolve sharper. Karen called out behind him, mocking, "Don't worry. Maybe we'll let you buy tickets when we auction it off." Laughter followed from a few of her supporters, but the man didn't react. He reached his porch, stopped, and turned back just enough to let his words carry, his tone calm, cold. Auction it if you want. But when they come asking, I won't be the one answering. The street went silent. Even the birds seemed to hush. Karen stiffened, her smirk cracking just slightly, but she turned away quickly, barking orders at the board members. Pretending not to care, the man entered his cabin, closing the door behind him. His chest tight but his mind clear. Karen thought she had humiliated him, thought she had control. But she didn't understand. She couldn't understand. That Jeep didn't belong to her, didn't even fully belong to him. It belonged to something bigger, something she could never control. And soon the knock on her door would prove it be why the afternoon the story of the Jeep had spread across the neighborhood like wildfire. Whispers floated from porch to porch, passed between neighbors walking dogs, between mothers watching children at the park, and every whisper carried Karen's name. She made sure of it. She strutted up and down the sidewalks with her clipboard hugged tight against her chest like a badge of honor, her bolt cutters dangling casually at her side as though they were a crown jewel. She stopped at every corner, knocking on doors, leaning close to whisper to anyone who would listen. He thought he could ignore the rules, thought he was above all of us. Well, I showed him. I took that Jeep right out from under his nose. The board stands behind me, and if he doesn't pay, it's going to be sold at auction. Her voice was smug, her tone proud, and though many of the neighbors forced polite nods, their eyes darted nervously toward his cabin, some unsure, some quietly unsettled by the boldness of her actions. But Karen didn't see doubt. She only saw her own power reflected back, every smile she imagined as victory, every whisper as confirmation that she had crushed him. She even gathered a group at the small park by evening, standing on the picnic bench as though she were a queen addressing her subjects, her voice carrying across the quiet street. This is proof that the HOA is strong, that no one can just do as they please, not even him. He broke rules, and rules have consequences. If we let one man defy us, chaos spreads. But I cut that chaos off at the root. A few clapped, others shifted uncomfortably. But Karen took it as applause, her smirk stretching wide. Meanwhile, inside his cabin the man sat by the window, watching from a distance, his face unreadable, his hands steady. He heard her words carried by the breeze, every mocking laugh, every boast about the Jeep, and instead of anger his lips curled slightly, not in joy but in grim patience. He knew the louder she shouted, the harder she would fall when the truth hit. He didn't need to fight her now, all he needed to do was wait. But that didn't mean it was easy. As night came on he stepped outside, the cool air brushing against his face. Neighbors still lingered in small groups, whispering, pointing, some shaking their heads, and he heard one phrase repeated over and over. She says the Jeep's going to auction. She says it's already hers to sell. His fists tightened at his sides, because he knew what was inside that Jeep, what kind of equipment, what kind of documents, things Karen could never be allowed to touch. He looked across the street and saw her standing tall, smirk plastered across her face, her eyes locking onto his with the gleam of victory. She raised her voice deliberately. "Sleep well tonight. Your Jeep is safe under HOA protection, until it becomes someone else's." A few chuckles followed, but most of the neighbors looked away, their unease clearer than before, and for the first time, her words felt overplayed, stretched too thin. The man didn't respond, didn't shout, didn't give her the satisfaction. He only turned, walked slowly back into his cabin, and closed the door, leaving Karen with her smirk hanging in the air. But inside he whispered to himself, his voice low and certain. "Boast while you can, Karen. Tomorrow your world changes, and you'll wish you never touched that Jeep." The next night the neighborhood was unusually quiet. No children playing in the yards, no neighbors gathered at the park, only the occasional bark of a dog breaking the silence. The man sat inside his cabin with the lights off, watching from behind the curtain. His eyes fixed on the empty street, his mind sharp, waiting, because he knew it was only a matter of time. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle, it was federal property. And when it went missing, alarms would be raised far beyond this quiet HOA community, and right on cue, just past 9 o'clock, the distant hum of engines broke through the night air. Headlights cut across the street as two black SUVs rolled in slow and deliberate. Their windows tinted, their movements precise. They weren't here by accident. They were here for the Jeep. Neighbors peeked nervously through blinds, pulling children back from windows. The SUVs stopped at the end of the street and 4 men stepped out, all in plain clothes, but their posture gave them away. Tall, steady, no wasted movement. The kind of presence that didn't need a uniform to be recognized as authority. They split into pairs, one heading straight toward his cabin, the other toward the far end where Karen's house stood. Their steps silent but purposeful. The knock on his door was firm, not polite, not angry, just commanding. The man opened it without hesitation. Meeting the cold gaze of one of the men, he flashed something quickly. "A badge," then spoke low. "We're here about a vehicle. A black Jeep, registered under a federal task force. We have reason to believe it was taken from this property. Can you tell us where it is?" The man's jaw tightened. He stepped aside slightly, his voice calm. "It was here, until yesterday. The HOA president came with bolt cutters, broke my lock, and took it. You'll find it across the street, in her driveway." The 2 men exchanged a sharp look, no surprise in their eyes, only confirmation. One of them spoke into a small radio clipped at his side. "Confirmed location, proceed." At once the other pair moved faster, their boots crunching against the pavement as they approached Karen's house. Neighbors ducked lower behind curtains, whispers spreading like fire. Karen's porch light flicked on and her front door opened. She stepped out with her hands on her hips, her robe wrapped tight, her voice sharp and annoyed. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just walk onto my property without HOA approval." The agents didn't answer her words, they didn't slow. They walked straight to the Jeep sitting in her driveway, their flashlights sweeping over the broken lock, the scratches on the door, the way the steering wheel lock had been forced. Karen hurried down her steps, her voice rising. "Excuse me. That vehicle was in violation. It was impounded under HOA authority. You have no jurisdiction here." One of the agents turned his head just enough, his voice flat but heavy. "This is federal property, not HOA. You're going to step back right now." The neighbors watching from the shadows gasped, whispers rushing like wind. Karen's face froze, her smirk flickering into something brittle, but she quickly forced a laugh. "Federal? That's ridiculous. It's just a Jeep. He's just a homeowner who refused to follow the rules. I was protecting the community." The agents ignored her excuses. One knelt by the Jeep, checking the plates. The other ran a gloved hand over the cut lock, muttering to his partner. "Confirmed tampering." Karen's voice cracked as she tried again. "You can't just take it. This is private property. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here." But her words sounded small against the calm precision of the men who didn't even look at her. One of them spoke into his radio again. "Vehicle located, condition compromised, securing now." The neighbors' whispers turned to open shock, the tension hanging heavy in the air, and across the street. The man stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching silently, his face unreadable but his eyes steady. He didn't need to say anything. The sight of Karen stumbling in front of the federal agents was enough, and as the night deepened, the balance of power in the neighborhood shifted. Karen's smirk was gone, replaced with the first flicker of fear. The agents moved with a calm precision that made the neighbors' whispers sharper and heavier. One agent walked around the Jeep slowly, scanning every detail, while another pulled on gloves and opened the driver's side door. The click echoed down the quiet street. Karen rushed forward, waving her arms, her voice shrill. "You can't touch that. That's HOA property now. We confiscated it under community rules, and you have no right to interfere." The agent glanced at her once, his expression cold and unshaken, then turned back to the Jeep, ignoring her like she was nothing more than background noise. The neighbors gasped, their faces pressed against windows, some filming secretly on their phones. Karen's voice cracked as she shouted louder, "I said stop. That Jeep was in violation, it was parked illegally, and I did what was necessary to protect this neighborhood." One agent straightened and looked at her, his tone flat but cutting. This vehicle belongs to a federal task force. It is not community property. It is not subject to HOA rules, and by cutting that lock you tampered with federal equipment." Karen froze, her lips parting but no words coming out. The neighbors' whispers swelled into shocked gasps. The man on his porch watched. Quietly, his arms crossed, his eyes steady as he saw her smirk crumble. One agent opened the back door of the Jeep, pulling out a heavy case stamped with official seals. The sight alone was enough to make Karen stumble back, her face draining of color. "What is that?" Someone whispered from a nearby porch. Another voice muttered, "Looks like government gear." The agents opened the case, revealing equipment, radios, tactical vests, sealed documents, all neatly packed and untouched. One of them nodded to his partner, contents intact, nothing missing. Karen's voice returned, but it was thinner, desperate. "I didn't touch any of that. I didn't even know it was there. I just removed the Jeep because it was against the rules, that's all." Her words tumbled over themselves, excuses spilling fast. But no one looked convinced, not the neighbors and certainly not the agents. One of them stepped closer to her, his voice harder now. "You broke into private property with bolt cutters. You moved a federal vehicle without authorization. And you tampered with secured equipment. That is not a violation. That is a federal offense." Karen's knees buckled slightly, her clipboard slipping from her hand and clattering onto the driveway, the sound echoing like a gavel sealing her fate. The neighbors gasped louder, phones raised higher, some recording every second. She shook her head wildly. No, you don't understand. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. I was protecting the community. I didn't know it was yours, I didn't know." But her pleas sounded weak, hollow, drowned by the cold certainty in the agent's tone. The man on his porch let out a slow breath, his lips curving in the faintest smile. Karen had wanted an audience for her victory, and now she had one for her downfall. The storm she thought she controlled had turned on her, and as the agents shut the Jeep doors and began sealing the scene, the entire neighborhood realized nothing would ever be the same again. Karen's face twisted as the agents continued their inspection of the Jeep, the glow of their flashlights bouncing off its black paint. Her breath came fast, her hands shaking. As she tried to gather herself, the neighbors pressed closer to their windows, some bold enough to step out onto porches, the weight of the scene pulling them in. Karen suddenly straightened, forcing her smirk back onto her face, though it looked brittle now, her voice rising shrill above the quiet street. "This is a mistake. All of you are overreacting. That Jeep was illegally parked, and as president of this HOA I had every right to enforce community standards. I was doing my duty." Her words carried through the night, but instead of nods and applause like before, the neighbors only muttered uneasily. No one stepped forward to defend her. One of the agents shut the Jeep's door firmly and turned to face her, his tone flat but heavy with finality. "Your duty does not extend to federal property. Your authority as HOA president stops at paint colors and lawn heights, not at cutting locks and stealing secured vehicles." The words struck sharp. Some of the neighbors gasped. Others whispered louder. Did he just say stealing? Federal property. She's in trouble. Karen's face flushed bright red, her smirk flickering, but she pressed on, desperate. "You don't understand. She jabbed a finger toward the man standing calm on his porch. "He provoked this. He refused to follow the rules. He left that Jeep there to mock us, to mock me. I acted because no one else would, because order matters, and if I hadn't, the whole neighborhood would have fallen into chaos." She spread her arms wide, her words rehearsed and dramatic, but now they fell flat. The crowd didn't cheer. The neighbors didn't clap. They only stared, their eyes shifting between her and the agents, the silence heavier than her shouting. One of the agents stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Are you admitting you cut the lock yourself? Karen blinked, her mouth opening and closing. She stammered, I was protecting the community. I didn't know it belonged to you. Her words were smaller now, weaker. The agent didn't move, his voice colder. Ignorance is not an excuse. You tampered with federal property. You obstructed federal operations. That's not community enforcement. That's a crime. The neighbors gasped louder. A woman on her porch whispered, she's done for. She really did it this time. Karen whipped around, her eyes wide, her voice rising higher. No, you can't listen to him. He's lying. This is all some trick. He set me up. He always wanted to ruin me, and now he's using you to do it. Her words pointed like knives at the man on the porch, but he didn't flinch. He only stared back, silent, his calmness making her panic look worse. Karen's voice cracked as she shouted, I am the president of this HOA. I have authority here. You can't just walk in and take his side. But her voice wavered, the smirk gone now, replaced with trembling lips. The agents exchanged looks, unimpressed. One of them muttered into his radio again. Suspect continues to deny. Community watching. Request backup. Karen's face twisted, her hands clutching at her robe, her eyes darting between the neighbors, looking for support. But no one moved, no one spoke for her. She was alone. The Queen of Rules stripped down to a desperate woman screaming. Into the night, the man leaned slightly on his porch railing. His voice low but cutting through the air. You wanted everyone to watch, Karen, and now they are. The only difference is they're not laughing with you anymore. Her face burned with fury and fear. She pointed at him again, trembling. But no words came out. Only the hollow sound of defeat filling her throat as the neighbors turned their eyes away from her. Ashamed, disgusted, finished with her reign. The agents didn't waste time. One of them pulled a small notebook from his jacket while the other adjusted the radio at his side, their movements sharp and deliberate, the kind that made even the boldest person shrink back. Karen tried to stand tall but her shoulders betrayed her, twitching as if weighed down by the stares of the entire neighborhood. One agent stepped closer, his voice calm but cutting. For the record, state your name and your position here. Karen swallowed hard, her lips trembling, but she forced her voice loud enough to be heard. Karen Walters, president of this HOA, elected by majority vote, responsible for maintaining order and enforcing community rules. She said it like a rehearsed speech, but the neighbors only muttered among themselves, some whispering, she's trying to sound important. They don't care about HOA rules. The agent didn't react, he only nodded slowly and pressed on. And did you personally cut the lock to access this Jeep? Karen's eyes widened, her lips opened. She stammered, I instructed that it be done, yes, because the vehicle was in violation. It was not authorized. It was a danger to order. And the agent cut her off sharply. Answer the question, yes or no, did you cut the lock? Karen froze, her hands twisting around her clipboard, her eyes darting toward the neighbors who leaned closer. Phones raised, recording every word. Her voice came out thin. Yes, I cut the lock, but only because it was my duty. I was protecting the community. Gasps erupted from the crowd, whispers rising like waves. She admitted it. She said yes. One man muttered, she's finished. Karen's face flushed. She turned quickly to the neighbors, shouting. You all saw. You all knew that Jeep wasn't supposed to be here. I was doing my job. I was protecting you. But her words rang hollow, drowned by the murmurs and the faint sound of someone's camera clicking. The agent didn't flinch, his voice steady as stone. So you admit you cut a lock on private property and removed a vehicle without consent? Karen snapped back, desperate. It wasn't private, it was against the rules, and as HOA president I have full authority to act. I don't need permission. The agent's eyes hardened, his voice colder now. That Jeep isn't just a vehicle, it's federal property tied to an active task force. By tampering with it you interfered with operations and put yourself in violation of federal law. Do you understand the severity of that? Karen's legs buckled. She grabbed the edge of her porch rail for balance, shaking her head violently. No, you're trying to scare me. This is ridiculous. It's just a Jeep, just a stupid Jeep. You can't put this on me. Her voice cracked on the last word. Neighbors whispered louder. One woman hissed to another. She doesn't get it. She really doesn't get it. Another muttered. They're going to take her in. Karen tried again, her voice shrill. You can't arrest me. I'm the president. I have immunity, but the agent stepped closer, towering over her, his voice sharp as a blade. The only thing you have right now is a record of trespass, theft, and obstruction. Immunity doesn't cover arrogance. The neighbors gasped again. Some even chuckled nervously. The man on his porch remained silent, his eyes fixed on Karen, his arms folded, his lips curved in the faintest smirk. Karen turned toward him suddenly, her voice breaking. This is your fault. You set me up, you wanted this to happen, you brought them here. But he didn't speak, didn't move, he only let her words echo into the night. Her panic laid bare for all to see. The silence of his calmness louder than any accusation. The agent scribbled notes, one of them muttering quietly. Suspect admitted entry and tampering, record complete. Karen's face drained of color, her eyes darting wildly across the crowd, searching for a single ally. But the neighbors only stared back, their faces cold, their trust in her shattered, their silence heavier than judgment. Karen realized in that moment she was alone, truly alone, surrounded not by followers but by witnesses to her own downfall. The night deepened. The storm of whispers never stopping as the agents moved with mechanical precision around the Jeep. One of them crouched low near the back wheel, running a flashlight across the underside, his voice low but firm as he called to his partner. Found it. Sealed compartment intact. The other agent nodded, pulling on heavier gloves before unlatching a hidden panel under the cargo bay. The metallic click echoed across the driveway. Neighbors gasped, pressing closer to their windows, a few daring to step onto porches with phones raised. Their screens glowing faintly in the dark. Karen stumbled forward, her voice panicked. What are you doing? You can't open that, that's my evidence, that's HOA property now. But the agent didn't even glance at her, his movement steady as he lifted the compartment lid. Inside lay more than just tools, thick envelopes marked with federal seals, electronic gear with blinking lights, cases labeled in bold black letters, task force use only. The crowd erupted in sharp whispers, some gasping, some clutching at each other. Karen's mouth dropped open, her voice shrill. That wasn't there before. He planted that, he must have, I never touched it, I didn't know. Her words tumbled over themselves, wild, desperate. But the more she shouted the less anyone seemed to believe. One agent carefully removed a sealed envelope, holding it up under the flashlight. The government emblem clear for all to see, his voice calm but commanding. This isn't a community violation. This is evidence tied to ongoing federal operations. Your interference is now on record, and your actions will be reviewed. 4 charges. Karen shook her head so hard her hair whipped against her face. No, I didn't interfere. I was just doing my job. I was keeping order. Her words broke, cracking into sobs that she tried to cover with anger. You can't do this to me. I'm the president. I'm in charge here. The neighbors' murmurs grew louder. One man whispered. She's cooked. She really is. Another muttered, Federal Task Force. That's not something you walk away from. A woman near the back added. And she bragged about it all day. She's finished. The agents ignored Karen's rambling pleas. One of them sealed the evidence back into its container, snapping locks into place, while the other clipped photos of the cut lock, the bolt cutters still lying on her driveway like the weapon they were. Karen turned wildly to the neighbors, her eyes wide, her voice desperate. You all saw. You all know I was protecting you. Tell them I was right. But the crowd only stared, their faces pale. Their silence louder than any denial. Not one stepped forward. Not one raised a voice to defend her. Karen's lips trembled as she realized the crowd she once ruled with fear was now her jury. And none of them believed her anymore. Across the street the man leaned against his porch rail, his face calm, his eyes dark but steady. He didn't need to speak. His silence was enough. Karen's own voice was her undoing. The agents shut the Jeep's doors firmly, one of them turning toward her with a stare that made her step back, his tone sharp. This vehicle and its contents are secured, your admission is on record, and your interference is documented. You will not touch it again. The words landed like hammers. Karen's knees shook, her smirk gone, her arrogance stripped. She tried to raise her chin but her lips quivered too much. Her eyes darted once more to the neighbors, begging silently for support. But all she saw was the truth reflected in their eyes. She was finished. Karen's composure shattered piece by piece as the agents closed the Jeep and began securing the evidence. The neighborhood had fallen into a heavy silence. Only the faint hum of radios and the clicking of pens as Notes were taken filled the night air, neighbors stood frozen on porches, some clutching phones, some whispering into each other's ears. But no one dared move closer. Karen looked around wildly, her breath ragged, her robe damp with sweat though the night was cool. She bent quickly, scooping up her clipboard from the driveway as if it could shield her from the weight of what was happening. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline, her voice breaking as she shouted, "Board members, come here. Now! This is an attack on our authority. We need to stand together. We need to show them that the HOA is united." Her shrill cries echoed down the street. A few board members who had been standing nervously on the edge of the crowd shifted awkwardly. One man in glasses cleared his throat. But when the agent's flashlight swung toward him he froze, his courage fading. Karen jabbed her finger toward him, her voice trembling but angry. "Tell them. Tell them we had every right. Tell them the rules matter, that I acted for the good of this neighborhood." The man shook his head quickly, mumbling, This is bigger than us, Karen, this isn't about rules anymore." And with that he slipped back into the crowd, avoiding her desperate gaze, her face twisted. She turned to another board member, a woman clutching her arms tightly. "You. Speak. You voted for me, you gave me authority, you know I was right." But the woman only whispered hoarsely, "You told us it was just a violation. You never said it was federal, you lied to us." Karen's breath caught in her throat, her voice cracking. No, I didn't lie, I didn't know, I was protecting all of you, can't you see, I was protecting the community." But the neighbors' eyes were cold now, their silence harder than any accusation. The man on his porch watched quietly, his lips curved in. The faintest trace of a smile, Karen spun back toward the agents, her tone changing in desperation. "Listen, this can be resolved, I'll pay a fine, I'll write an apology, we don't need to escalate, we're all civilized people here." But the agent only stared at her, his voice calm but merciless. "You've already admitted to cutting the lock, to removing the Jeep, and to interfering with federal property. This isn't about apologies. This is about accountability." Karen's body trembled, her knees weakening. She turned again to the crowd, her voice shattering. "Please, someone speak for me. Someone tell them I'm not a criminal, I'm your president. I kept your lawns trimmed, I kept your fences in line, I kept this place beautiful." But the neighbors only murmured louder, their faces turned away, the loyalty she once commanded gone, stripped from her in the harsh light of truth. One man near the front finally shouted back, "You didn't protect us. You terrorized us. You bullied us. And now look what you've done." His words cut deep, the neighbors nodding, their whispers turning into angry mutters. Karen staggered, her smirk long gone, her clipboard shaking in her hands. She looked smaller now, weaker, a woman stripped of the crown she never truly owned. The agents finished sealing the Jeep, their presence unshaken, their control absolute. And in that moment it was clear to everyone that Karen was no longer the ruler of the neighborhood. She was its shame, exposed in front of those she once commanded, abandoned by the very board she thought loyal, left standing alone in the ruins of her own arrogance. The night pressed heavier over the street as Karen stood shaking in her driveway, the clipboard clutched to her chest like a useless shield, her eyes darting from the agents to the neighbors, to the board members who had slipped into the background, none of them stepping forward, none of them saving her. The power she once carried in every word had vanished, leaving her small and desperate. The agents finished their notes, one of them speaking quietly into his radio. "Scene secured, suspect non-compliant, awaiting transport." The words made Karen's eyes widen. She stumbled forward, her voice shrill. No, you don't understand. You can't take me. I'm not a suspect. I'm the president. I was only doing my job." Her voice cracked into a half-scream, half-plea, echoing off the houses. But no one moved to comfort her. No one defended her. The neighbors. Silence was cold, broken only by whispers. "She's finished. They're going to take her. All that arrogance, now look at her." The man on his porch finally moved, stepping down slowly, his boots splashing in the puddles that dotted the street. Every eye shifted toward him as he crossed the road, calm and steady, his expression unreadable. But his presence alone heavy enough to make Karen stumble back a step. She tried to raise her chin, tried to find the smirk that had carried her for so long. But her lips trembled too much. The man stopped a few feet away, the agents watching silently, giving him space, as though they knew this moment wasn't theirs to take. His voice was low but it carried clear in the still night. "You spent years cutting people down with rules, humiliating them, making yourself bigger by making them smaller. You thought no one could touch you, not here, not in this neighborhood you claimed as your kingdom. Karen shook her head frantically, her voice breaking. No, no, I kept order, I did what had to be done, But the man raised his hand slightly, silencing her, his tone sharper now. And then you touched what was never yours, you cut my lock, you stole my Jeep, and you bragged about it. But what you didn't know was that Jeep wasn't just mine, it was federal property, and by touching it, by making it your trophy, you destroyed yourself. Gasps rippled through the neighbors again, Karen's knees shook, her body swaying as though the weight of his words pressed harder than the agent's presence. She tried one last desperate cry. I didn't know. How could I know? But the man's eyes hardened, his voice like steel. Ignorance doesn't save you, Karen, arrogance doesn't protect you, and now everyone sees you for what you are, powerless. The neighbors murmured louder, their faces reflecting not fear of her anymore, but relief that her reign had ended. The agent stepped closer, one of them pulling a pair of restraints from his belt. Karen's eyes widened, she backed away quickly, her voice cracking into screams. No, you can't. This is my neighborhood. I'm the president. You need me. But the crowd didn't move, no one lifted a finger. The same people she had ruled over with her smirk and clipboard now watched with cold satisfaction as the agents closed in. The man stepped back, his expression calm, his voice low, almost to himself but loud enough for her to hear. You wanted everyone to see your power, now they'll only remember your fall. Karen's scream turned to sobs as the agents took her by the arms, leading her away from the Jeep she once claimed as hers. Her clipboard fell again, clattering against the wet pavement. Forgotten, the neighbors watched silently, some shaking their heads, some whispering, but none with pity. The man turned, walking slowly back across the street, up his porch steps, and into his cabin, the door closing behind him with quiet finality. Outside the storm of whispers grew heavier, but inside he sat calm, the weight lifted, his Jeep secured once more, Karen broken. Her empire collapsed, and the neighborhood forever changed, because the queen of fines and rules had finally been undone by her own hands.